I'm the youngest of 3 children. My dad was a businessman in New York, but his worldview was very much shaped by his service during World War II. He was in the Air Force, stationed in Guam, and he was too big to fly. He was 6'8". So they said, would you please train to run the supply chain? And you know how important supply chains are. It's almost not the glamorous part of the military, but the frontline fighters are not going to be able to do anything unless their supply chain works. And Dad instilled in me at a very early age that sometimes the hard back office work is what's most important and not always glamorous, but very helpful. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but interestingly, she too was stationed in the South Pacific during World War II. And she joined up in the Red Cross in Boston, Massachusetts, what a lot of women in her generation did. And she thought she was going to stay in Boston and it would be quite safe and manageable. But on her first day of work, they said, we need this class of women to go to New Guinea in the South Pacific. So she flew from Boston to San Francisco and then got on a troop ship with all women from San Francisco to New Guinea for 30 days. She said the very best part about that was she got seasick on the trip and lost 30 pounds. She gets to New Guinea, and the base commander greets this troop ship of women and says, we have a shortage of airplane mechanics and truck mechanics. Which of you women would like to volunteer? Trust me, my mother had never looked under the hood of anything. But she raised her hand because she knew that was where the need was greatest. And 4 years later, she was a fully certified airplane mechanic and a fully certified truck mechanic. And she used to tell the 3 children, as I said, I'm the youngest of 3 children, she would tell my brother and sister and me, you can do anything you want because I learned how to overhaul a Jeep engine faster than the men. I was a product of the public school system, kindergarten through 12th grade, and I'll come back to that. I have a passion for our public school system. And as you know, in California, we are not doing the job we need to do for the next generation of Californians. I then was in just the 4th class of women to go to Princeton University. I arrived in the fall of 1973, 100 women in a class of 1,200, and we had a great time for a whole variety of reasons. I then ended up at Harvard Business School, where I met my husband, who was in medical school in Boston. And my husband very much wanted to be a doctor, and he got into the very best training program in the country for neurosurgery, which was the University of California in San Francisco. And that's a picture of my husband up there in his scrubs. He's now at Stanford as a neurosurgeon. And so we decamped to the Haight-Ashbury as newlyweds. And my husband's from quite a traditional southern Birmingham, Alabama family. And his parents came out to visit the newlyweds in the Haight-Ashbury from Birmingham. They were a little appalled. But we loved California from the beginning. And actually, my husband and I will be married 30 years the day before the primary, June 7th. So. We have 2 boys who are now grown, a 25-year-old who lives and works in Boston, graduated from college, and a younger one, Will, who is 22 years old, who's a junior in college. And so we have been in California for most of the last 30 years. And I've had a chance to work for some great companies. I worked for the Walt Disney Company. I worked for Bain & Company. And the only reason that that will be interesting to you is that my first boss at Bain & Company and my boss for most of the 10 years I worked there was actually Mitt Romney. And that's how I ended up, of course, working on his presidential campaign many years later. I worked, as I said, I worked at the Walt Disney Company, at Hasbro, where I ran the preschool division. So I was responsible for brands like Barney, Arthur, Teletubbies, and Mr. Potato Head, my personal favorite. In any case, no company changed my way of thinking quite like eBay. And I joined eBay when it was a tiny little startup, $4.7 million in revenue and 30 employees. And when I left 10 years later, we'd grown the company to nearly $8 billion in revenue and 15,000 employees. But perhaps what's most remarkable about eBay is it became the home of small business on the internet. Today, over 1 million people make most, if not all, of their living selling on the site.